In this episode, we'll build on what we explored previously and look more closely at how emotional confidence develops over time and why people often begin to feel more secure without needing to define exactly why. Emotional confidence is often misunderstood. Many people imagine it as certainty, self belief, or strong sense of knowing what will happen next. In everyday life, it rarely feels like that. More often, emotional confidence shows up as a quiet absence of urgency. You may notice that situations still matter to you, but they don't pull you in the same way. A delay doesn't immediately demand an explanation. A change in tone doesn't automatically trigger concern. You're aware of what's happening, but you're not carried away by it. This kind of confidence develops gradually, not because people try to become confident, but because internal balance becomes more consistent. Earlier, we talked about how closeness and distance begin to settle into a steadier rhythm. Emotional confidence often grows out of that steadiness. When connection no longer needs to be actively maintained, there's less internal monitoring. With less monitoring comes more ease. People often describe this as feeling more settled without knowing exactly what changed. They haven't learned a new rule or adapted a new mindset. Life simply feels a little less charged. One way this shows up is in how people relate to uncertainty. Uncertainty doesn't disappear, but it stops dominating attention. You can hold not knowing without needing to resolve it immediately. That tolerance is a key part of emotional confidence. Another sign is how people respond to emotional fluctuations. Feeling unsettled no longer feels like a problem that needs fixing. It becomes a temporary state that can be noticed and allowed to pass. This reduces the need for constant regulation. You might notice that you're less inclined to analyze your reactions. Instead of asking why you feel a certain way, you accept that you do. That acceptance doesn't stop reflection, but it removes the pressure. Emotional confidence also affects how people interpret their own feelings. Instead of treating emotions as instructions, they're seen as signals. Information rather than commands, this makes responses more flexible. In practical terms, this can look very ordinary. You feel anxious before a meeting, but you don't assume it means something is wrong. You feel disappointed, but you don't immediately search for reassurance. You feel uncertain, but you allow it to coexist with action. What's important here is that emotional confidence doesn't require constant awareness. In fact, it often coincides with less self focus. People are less preoccupied with how they're doing emotionally because emotions no longer feel destabilizing. This is why emotional confidence can be hard to pinpoint. It's noticed in hindsight, you realize you handled something more calmly, or that you didn't spiral in the way you used to, or that you recovered more quickly than expected. Another subtle change is how people relate to reassurance. When confidence develops, reassurance becomes optional rather than necessary. It may still be appreciated, but is no longer required to settle the system. This shift tends to reduce emotional reactivity overall, not because people feel less, but because feelings aren't amplified by the urgency. The internal environment becomes more stable. It's also common for people to feel more secure without being able to explain why. This can feel confusing at first. We're often taught to understand change cognitively. Emotional confidence doesn't always offer a clear narrative. That lack of explanation isn't a problem, it's often a sign that change has become embodied rather than conceptual. The system has learned something through experience rather than insight. As this steadiness develops, people often find themselves engaging with life more directly. Less preparation, less anticipation, more presence. Emotional confidence doesn't remove difficulty, it changes how difficulty is met. Challenges feel more navigatable. Setbacks feel less defining. Wait, is navigatable a word? I don't know. But you know what I mean. This brings us to an important next step. As people become more emotionally confident, they also begin to notice something else more clearly. Can you guess what it is? The moments when confidence drops, the situations that activate anxiety more strongly, the triggers that still have power. In the next episode, we'll move into that territory and look more closely at everyday anxiety and emotional activation, why some experiences provoke stronger reactions than others, and how understanding this helps make sense of what still feels difficult even as confidence grows.